Maayong hapon sa tanan. So, gandang hapon sa lahat. Continue ko na yung pagbabasa ko. Habang wala pang bumibisita sa bahay ko, so magbabasa tayo. Wait lang. Super init dito. Kaya babasahan ko na lang kayo. So, last time nung nagbasa ako, from 1 to 20, page 1 to 20. So, ngayon naman, tutuloy natin sa page 21. Page 21. Kita ba siya? Page 21. So, yung pinakalas na nabasa natin is, search your own heart with all diligence, for out of it the issues of life. So, primary and secondary greatness. My experience with my son, my study of perception, in my reading of the success literature, caused to create one of those. Cool. Coles. Word for the day encounter. Coe. Coles. Coals. Coles. Coles. It's a verb. Verb. In my reading of the success literature, coalesced come together to form one mass or whole. Combine. Literature combined to create one of those aha experiences in life when suddenly things click into place. I was suddenly able to see the powerful impact of the personality ethic and to clearly understand those subtle, often consciously unidentified discrepancy between what I knew to be true. Some things I had been taught many years ago as a child, and things that were deep in my own inner self of sense of values. In the quick fix philosophies that surrounded me every day, I understood at a deeper level why, as I had worked through the years with people from all walks of life. I have found that the things I was teaching and knew to be effective were often at variance with these popular voices. I am not suggesting that elements of the personality ethic, personality growth, communication skill training, and education, the field of influence strategies and positive thinking, are not beneficial. In fact, sometimes essentials for success. I believe they are, but these are secondary, not primary traits. Perhaps in utilizing our human capacity to build on the foundation of generations before us, we have inadvertently become so focused on our own building that we have forgotten the foundation that holds it up, or in reaping for so long where we have not sown, perhaps we have forgotten the need to sow. If I try to use someone smart, pila, ang load wallet, 2010. Thank you. Sure, login. Sir 995-701-8356. If I try to use human influence strategies and tactics of how to get other people to do what I want, to work better, to be more motivated, to like me and each other, while my character is fundamentally flawed, marked by duplicity and insincerity, then in the long run I cannot be successful. My duplicity will breed distrust in everything I do. Even using so called good human relations techniques will be perceived as manipulative. It simply makes no difference how good the rhetoric is or even how good the intention are. Rhetoric. 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 Naa. Pila. Naa. Dos. Otso. Naa. Rhetoric. Even there is a little someone, it simply makes no difference how good the rhetoric is. Rhetoric. Dos. Ba? Rhetoric. Rhetoric.
Pero ano ko, ipakita mo ako nito sa kuwan.
R. Rhetoric. Noun. The art or the art of effective or persuasive speaking or writing. So rhetoric is the noun, the art of effective or persuasive speaking or writing, especially the use of figure of speech and other compositional techniques.
Ay, kuan, sabi ko ito. Oh,
If there is little or no trust, there is no foundation for permanent success. Saman, naa. Thank you. Rhetoric. There is no foundation for permanent success. Only basic goodness gives life to techniques. Only basic goodness gives life to technique. Mhm. Only basic goodness. Only basic goodness gives life to technique. Only basic goodness gives life to technique. To focus on technique is like cramming your way through school. Through school, you sometimes get by, perhaps even get good grades. But if you don't pay the price, someone smart, pila, 15, 09, 10, ah,
Ay, 0910381146
0910381141. Hala, kuha na ni, regular na ni. Ambe. Yara ah. So to focus on technique is like cramming your way through school. You sometimes get by, perhaps even get good grades. But if you don't pay the price day in and day out, you never achieve true mastery of the subjects You study or develop an educated mind. Yes. Sa ganitong situation, totoo talaga to. Yung bang, yung hinahabol mo lang is yung good grades. Tapos, yung value, yung learnings, doon sa subject na tinuturo is hindi talaga na-apply sa totoong buhay. Hindi din talaga siya magiging okay. Did you ever consider how ridiculous it would be to try to cram on a farm? To forget to plant in the spring, play all summer, and then cram in the fall to bring in the harvest? The farm is a natural system. The price must be paid and the process followed. You always reap what you sow. There is no shortcut. You always reap what you sow. There is no shortcut. This principle is also true ultimately in human behavior, in human relationships. They too are natural system based on the law of the harvest. In the short run, in an artificial social system such as school, yes,
Ano may load there?
pila,
Load 100.
09,
16,
ah,
61,
ah,
11,
ah, 09
960.
ha?
960.
091661111960 100.
100. Smart food. Smart 30.
Zero nine
50.
ah
53.
ah
96.
ha
96.
96
935.
0950539695 136. Thank you. Ara ulo mom. In the short run, in an artificial social system such as school, you may be able to get by if you learn how to manipulate the man made rules to play the game. In most one shot or short lived human interactions, you can use the personality ethic to get by and to make favorable impressions through charm and skill in pretending to be interested in other people's hobbies. You can pick up quick, easy techniques that may work in a short-term situations, but secondary traits alone have no permanent worth in long-term relationships. Eventually, if there isn't deep integrity and fundamental character strength, the challenges of life will cause true motives to surface and human relationship failure will replace short-term success. Many people with secondary greatness, that is, social recognition for their talents, lack primary greatness or goodness in their character. Sooner or later, you'll see this in every long-term relationship they have, whether it is with a business associate, a spouse, a friend, or a teenage child going through an identity crisis. It is character that communicates most eloquently. As Emerson once put it, what you are shouts so loudly in my ears, I cannot hear what you say. Mhm. What you are shouts
Doon ako, ng 7-Eleven, ma. Ha? Ah, sige.
so loudly,
Napakabili sa doon.
so loudly
Taod. Ano man?
in my ears.
Ah, sige.
I cannot hear what you say. Parang confusing. What you are shouts so loudly. But in my ears, I cannot hear what you say.
Hello? Nasa ka? Ay, hello? Te?
These are, of
Wow.
course, situations where people have character strength but they lack communication skills. And that undoubtedly affects the quality of relationship as well. Mm. But the effects are still secondary. In the last analysis, what we are communicates far more eloquently than anything we say or do. We all know it. There are people we trust absolutely because we know their character, whether they're eloquent or not, whether they have the human relations technique or not. We trust them and we work successfully with them. In the words of William George Jordan, into the hands of every individual is given a marvelous power for good or evil, the silent, unconscious, unseen influence of his life. This is simply the constant radiation of what man really is, not what he pretends to be. So the power of paradigm. The seven habits, the seven habits of highly effective people embody many of the fundamental principles of human effectiveness. These habits are basic. They are primary. They represent the internalization They represent the internalization of correct principles upon which enduring happiness and success are based. But before we can really understand these seven habits, we need to understand our own paradigms and how to make a paradigm shift. Both the character and the personal ethic are example of social paradigm. The word paradigm comes from the Greek. It was originally a scientific term and is more commonly used today to mean and is more commonly used today to mean a model, theory, perception, assumption, assumption or frame of reference. In the more general sense, it's the way we see the world. not in terms of our visual sense of sight, but in terms of perceiving, understanding, interpreting. For our purposes, a simple way to understand paradigm is to see them as maps. We all know that map is not the territory. A map is simply an explanation of certain aspects of the territory. That's exactly what a paradigm is. It is a theory, an explanation, or model of something else. Suppose you wanted to arrive at a specific location in central Chicago. A street map of the city would be great help to you in reaching your destination. But suppose you were given the wrong map. Through a printing error, the map labeled Chicago was actually a map of Detroit. Can you imagine the frustration, the ineffectiveness of trying to reach your destination? You might work on your behavior. You could try harder, be more diligent, double your speed, but your efforts would only succeed in getting you to the wrong place faster. You might work on your attitude. You could think more positively. You still wouldn't get to the right place, but perhaps you wouldn't care. Your attitude would be so positive, you'd be happy wherever you were. The point is, you'd still be lost. The fundamental problem has nothing to do with your behavior or your attitude. It has everything to do with having a wrong map. If you have the right map of Chicago, then becomes important. And when you encounter frustrating obstacles along the way, then attitude can make a real difference. But the first and most important requirements is the accuracy of the map. Each of us has many maps in our head, which can be divided into main categories. Maps of the way things are, or realities. So, two main categories: maps of the way things are, or realities. Maps of the way things are, or realities, and maps of the way things should be, or values. We interpret everything we experience through these mental maps. We seldom question their accuracy. We're usually even unaware that we have them. We simply assume that the way we see things is the way they really are or the way they should be. And our attitudes and behaviors grow out of those assumptions. The way we see things is the source of the way we think and the way we act. The way. The source. The way we see things. The way we see things is the source of the way we think and the way we act. The way we see things is the source of the way we think and the way we act. Before going any further, I invite you to have an intellectual and emotional experience. Take a few seconds and just look at the picture on the following page. Now look at the picture on page 26 and carefully describe what you see. Do you see a woman? Saman, say load. Ara. Og salamat. How old would you say she is? What does she look like?
Padala.
Ma'am, pilay padala? Pilay padala?
1,000 na ma'am.
Pasulat na lang ko din ma'am ha. Patong form na ako.
Ang kanin.
Name nimo, name sa padadaan, tapos cellphone number nimo, cellphone number niya, tapos ang account, ug ang amount. I invite you to have an intellectual emotional experience. Take a few seconds and just look at the picture on the following page. Now look at the picture on page 26. So this is the picture. What you see on the picture. Me, I see a picture of young lady. Around 20 something. 20 to 30s. Now look at the picture on page 26 and carefully describe what you see. 26. Page.
Dara ma'am.
I see a elegant woman. Ma'am, account number, ma'am, sa katong padadaan. Ah.
Ayo.
Saman,
Zero.
naa,
Sila.
tagdos. Sa isanan,
Sila.
size, six. Ara 1,030
ko doon, ma'am.
Lang.
Mantrado. Tapos kinaan yung bitin. Sarap ka pa doon yung god. Meron ko pa kuan. Grabe na ba?
Hala.
Sa pagkumanaan mo, dito to pa.
Kakisa ni.
Ang sikli pa. Pag gumag yung sikli, dito ka pa. Ang kailangan ko dito. Yes, okay siguro. Kailangan ko
9-6.
Asa mo kung biyay? Mawala ko kung anak ay diyan napita. Pero irang mali ko.
60.
Sila na ako anak. Sila na ako makuha. Buwan lang God. Ang samuan. Free lang siya.
60.
Free lang siya. Niya kay ako na may nataktan sa laing lungsod. Ano siya?
Kanya.
Napod ako. Isa lang ng valid ID, palinhod. Pag kumalaan, di pa sa unang division na ko. Dito. Karon. Kurang dali. Jadi kami ganina. Ya, buntag. No, then kabalo ko alas 3 pa daw ang tuwan.
4.
Ito. Buntag ko na may doktor diyan. Ang mo. Ha, kay ang ingon alas 3 pa daw ang doktor.
Then, tanan.
Ito ako.
Kailang mama. Amo. So we're going to send money before reading this book. Five five 775 194 8177217. One thousand. 0997 59 12249. 0955 8475 971. 0955 8475 971. So where are we? Hmm. So this is the first picture, and then the second picture is this one. Second picture is this one. Is it clear? Oh no, no, I don't think it's clear. This one is better. What do you see? I see an elegant woman. Do you see a woman? How old would you say she is? What does she look like? What is she wearing? In what kind of rules do you see her? You probably will describe the woman in the second picture to be about 25 years old. Very lovely, rather fashionable with a petite nose and a demure presence. If you were a single man, you might like to take her out.
Follow the Ekuma
Smart?
AM by mistake.
09.
97
Uh-uh.
59
Uh-uh.
122
Oo.
49
099759 12249. Bali.
20.
Dito dito ka ano? Nagkasama dito. Saan eh? So you probably would describe the woman in the second picture to be about 25 years old, very lovely, rather fashionable with a petite nose and a demure presence. If you were a single man, you might like to take her out. If you were in retailing, you might hire her as a fashion model. But what if I were to tell you that you're wrong? What if I said this picture is of a woman in her 60s or 70s who looks sad, has a huge nose, and is certainly no model? She's someone you probably would help across the street. Who's right? Look at the picture again. Can you see the old woman? If you can't, keep trying. Can you see her big hook nose? Her shawl? If you and I were talking face to face, we could discuss the picture. You could describe what you see to me, and I could talk to you about what I see. You could continue to communicate until you clearly showed me what you see in the picture, and I clearly showed you what I see. Because we can't do that, turn to page 45 and study the picture. Saman, page 45. This this one is old woman. There and then look at this picture again. Can you see the old woman now? So from this one to this one, we can see the old woman, the nose, hmm, the nose, and the big mouth. The mouth, the shoulder, and the sad face. This is the eye of an old woman. It is important that you see her before you continue reading. I first encountered this exercise many years ago at the Harvard Business School. The instructor was using it to demonstrate clearly and eloquently that two people can see the same thing, disagree, and yet both be right. It's not logical, it's psychological. He brought into the room a stack of large cards, half of which had the image of the young woman you saw on page 25, and the other half of which had the image of the old woman on page 45. He passed them out of the class. He passed them out to the class, the picture of the young woman to one side of the room and the picture of the old woman to the other. He asked us to look at the cards, concentrate on them for about 10 seconds, and then pass them back in. He then projected upon the screen the picture you saw on page 26, combining both images and asked the class to describe what they saw. Almost every person in that class who had first seen the young woman's image on a card saw the young woman in the picture, and almost every person who had first seen the old woman's image on a card saw an old woman in the picture. The professor then asked one student to explain what he saw to a student. Saman?
Ng wifi. So, namin LDT.
Ah,
Ang 1 month ana ma'am, wala ma'am.
patong gitry na to, wala di ba? Nagkuan siya.
Wala na line. 1 week ra man gud long murag
Dali ra.
dali ra. 2 weeks.
Check nato din sa PLDT na ano. Zero 0949-277-6569. Homeboost 349. Check din nato na yun. Home boost 349. PLDT. $599 ang iyahang kuan, ma'am. 1 month.
1 month,
Oo.
599.
Oo.
Mubo na lang ko anak din man. Kaysa 200 ang semana, 800 ang 1 month.
0949-2776-569. Combos 599. 0949-277-6569.
Why are you wearing skirt?
Why? Is there a problem wearing skirt?
No. Muni nga, live stream ko. Muni nagtanaw mga dire ka na kadito. Are. Ang kaning one watching mo.
$401. One, two, 401. Thank you. The professor then asked one student to explain what he saw to a student on the opposite side of the room. As they talked back and forth, communication problems flared up. Flared up. Flared. 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 Adjective. Especially if an item or clothing having a shape that widens. Siguro eh. What does flared up mean? A sudden outburst of intensification. A sudden bursting of a smoldering fire into flame or a light danger flares up. Flares up. So parang nag-aaway-away na. What do you mean, old lady? She couldn't be more than 20 or 20 years old. Oh, come on. You have to be joking. She's 70. 70. Could be pushing 80. What's the matter with you? Are you blind? This lady is young, good looking. I'd like to take her out. She's lovely. Lovely? She's an old hag. The arguments went back and forth, each person sure of an adamant in. Adamant in. Adamant. Adamant in. Layered adamantine. Adamant. Adjective, refusing to be persuaded or to change one's mind. Mm. So the arguments went back and forth, each person sure of and adamant in his or her position. All of this occurred in spite of one exceedingly important advantage the student had. Most of them knew early in the demonstration that another point of view did, in fact, exist, something many of us would never admit. Nevertheless, at first, only a few students really tried to see this picture from another frame of reference. After a period of futile communication, one student went up to the screen and pointed to a line on the drawing. There is the young woman's necklace. The other one said, "No, that is the old woman's mouth." Gradually, they began to calmly discuss specific points of difference, and finally, one student and then another experienced sudden recognition when the image of both came into focus. Through continued calm, respectful, and specific communication, each of us in the room was finally able to see the other point of view. But when we look away and then back, most of us would immediately see the image we had been conditioned to see in the 10-second period of time. I frequently use this perception demonstration in working with people and organizations because it yields so many deep insights into both personal and interpersonal effectiveness. It shows, first of all, how powerfully conditioning affects our perception, our paradigms. If 10 seconds can have that kind of impact on the way we see things, what about the conditioning of a lifetime?
Ayaw,
Saman,
ay, what yun?
wala may siguro review.
Wala.
Our paradigms. So what about the condition of a lifetime? Lifetime. The influence in our lives, family, school, church, work environment, friends, associates, and current social paradigms, such as the personality ethic, all have made their silent and conscious impact on us and help shape our frame of reference, our paradigms, our maps. It also shows that these paradigms are the source of our attitudes and behaviors. We cannot act with integrity outside of them. We simply cannot maintain wholeness if we talk and walk differently than we see. If you were among the 90% who typically see the young woman in the composite picture when conditioned to do so, you undoubtedly found it difficult to think in terms of having to help her cross the street. Both your attitude about her and your behavior toward her had to be congruent with the way you saw her. This brings into focus one of the basic flaws. This brings into focus one of the basic flaws of the personality ethic. To try to change outward attitudes and behaviors does very little good in the long run if we fail to examine the basic paradigms from which we those attitudes and behavior flows. This perception demonstration also shows how powerfully our paradigms affect the way we interact with other people. As clearly and objectively as we think we see things, we begin to realize that others see them differently from their own apparently equally clear and objective point of view. Where we stand depends on where we sit. Each of us tends to think we see things as they are, that we are objective, but this is not the case. We see the world not as it is, but as we are, or as we are conditioned to see it. When we open our mouths to describe what we see, we in effect describe ourselves, our perceptions, our paradigms. When other people disagree with us, we immediately think something is wrong with them. But the demonstration shows sincere, clear headed people see things differently, each looking through the unique lens of experience. This does not mean that there are no facts. In the demonstration, two individuals who initially have been influenced by different conditioning pictures look at the third picture together. They are now both looking at the same identical facts, black lines and white spaces, and they would both acknowledge this as facts. But each person's interpretation of these facts represent prior experiences, and that the facts have no meaning whatsoever apart from the interpretation. The more aware we are of our basic paradigms, maps, or assumptions, and the extent to which we have been influenced by our experience, the more we can take responsibility for those paradigms, examine them, test them against reality, listen to others, and be open to their perceptions, thereby getting a larger picture in a far more objective view. The power of a paradigm shift. Perhaps the most important insight to be gained from the perception demonstration is in the area of paradigm shifting, what we might call the aha experience, when someone finally sees the composite picture in another way. The more bound the person is by the initial perception, the more powerful the aha experience is. It's as though a light were suddenly turned on inside. The paradigm shift was introduced by Thomas Kuhn in his highly influential landmark book, The Structure of Scientific Revolution. Kuhn shows how almost every significant breakthrough in the field of scientific endeavor is first a break with tradition, with old ways of thinking, with old paradigms. For Ptolemy, the great Egyptian astronomer, the earth was the center of the universe. But Copernicus created a paradigm shift in a great deal of resistance and persecution as well by placing the sun as the center. Suddenly, everything took on a different interpretation. The the Newtonian model of physics was a clockwork paradigm and is still the basis of modern engineering, but it was partial, incomplete. The scientific world was revolutionized by the Einstein's paradigm, the relativity paradigm, which had much higher predictive and explanatory value. Ah, isa, isa is water, dos,
Nagpila ning register
seven, change, two, Until the germ theory was developed, a high percentage of women and children died during childbirth. A high percentage of women and children died during childbirth, and no one could understand why. In military skirmism, more men were dying from small wounds and diseases than from the major traumas on the front lines. So man, raa, eat, raa. Excuse. But as soon as the germ theory was developed, a whole new paradigm, a better, improved way of understanding what was happening made dramatic, significant medical improvement possible. The United States today is the fruit of a paradigm shift. The traditional concept of a government for centuries had been a monarchy, the divine right of kings. Then a different paradigm was developed, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. When a constitutional democracy was born, unleashing tremendous human energy and ingenuity in creating a standard of living, of freedom and liberty, of influence and hope unequaled in the history of the world. Not all paradigm shifts are in positive direction. As we have observed, the shift from the character ethic to the personality ethic has drawn us away from the very roots that nourish true success and happiness. But whether they shift us in a positive or negative direction, whether they are instantaneous or developmental, paradigm shift move us from the one way of seeing the world to another. And those shifts create powerful change. Our paradigms, correct or incorrect, are the source of our attitudes and behavior, and ultimately our relationships with others. I remember a mini paradigm shift I experienced one Sunday morning on a subway in New York. People were sitting quietly, some reading newspapers, some lost in thought, some resting with their eyes closed. It was a calm, peaceful scene. Then suddenly, a man and his children entered the subway car. The children were so loud and rambunctious. Ram. Rambunctious. Ram. Rambunctious. 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 Mm. Adjective, uncontrollably exuberant or boisterous. Mm. Rambunctious means noisy and out of control, like a rambunctious child who is so hard to handle that no babysitter has ever come. Okay. Then suddenly a man and his children entered the subway car. The children were so loud and rambunctious that instantly the whole climate changed. The man sat down next to me and closed his eyes, apparently oblivious to the situation. The children were yelling back and forth, throwing things, even grabbing people's paper. It was very disturbing, and yet the man sitting next to me did nothing. It was difficult not to feel irritated. I could not believe that he could be so insensitive as to let his children run wild like that and do nothing about it, taking no responsibility at all. It was easy to see that everyone else on the subway felt irritated too. So finally, with what I felt was unusual patience and restraint, I turned to him and said, "Sir, your children are really disturbing a lot of people. I wonder if you couldn't control them a little more." The man lifted his gaze as if to come to unconsciousness of the situation for the first time and said softly, "Oh, you're right. I guess I should do something about it. We just came from the hospital where their mother died about an hour ago. I don't know what to think, and I guess they don't know how to handle it either." Can you imagine what I felt at that moment? My paradigm shifted. Suddenly, I saw things differently. And because I saw differently, I thought differently. I felt differently. I behaved differently. My irritation vanished. I didn't have to worry about controlling my attitude or my behavior. My heart filled with the man's pain. Feelings of sympathy and compassion flowed freely. "Your wife just died? Oh, I am so sorry. Can you tell me about it? What can I do to help?" Everything changed in an instant. Many people experience a similar fundamental shift in thinking when they face a life threatening crisis and suddenly see their priorities in a different light, or when they suddenly step into a new role, such as that of husband or wife, parent or grandparent, manager or leader. We could spend weeks, months, even years laboring with a personality ethic, trying to change our attitudes and behaviors, and not even begin to approach that phenomenon of change that occurs spontaneously when we see things differently. It becomes obvious that if we want to make relatively minor change in our lives, we can perhaps appropriately focus on our attitudes and behaviors. But if we want to make significant quantum change, we need to work on our basic paradigms. In the words of Thoreau, "For every thousand hacking at the leaves of evil, there is one striking at the root." Mm. For every thousand hacking at the leaves of evil, there is one striking at the We can only achieve quantum improvements in our lives as we quit hacking at the leaves of attitude and behavior and get to work on the root, the paradigms from which our attitudes and behavior flow. Seeing and being. Of course, not all paradigm shifts are instantaneous. Unlike my instant insight in the subway, the paradigm shifting experience Sandra and had Sandra and I had with Sandra and I had with our son was a slow, difficult, and deliberate process. The approach we had first taken with him was the outgrowth of years of conditioning and experience in the personality ethic. It was the result of the deeper paradigms we held about our own success as parents, as well as the measure of success of our children. Saman,
Ay, pero,
naa,
pero sa kanya. Oh, Kini po daw. Back to back lang. Ay, wala. Back to back lang isa. Ito sa susundan.
Size tanan.
Ha?
Size. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, Doc.
Okay mo to 90 lagi. I-try mo to uban.
Wala na ako siya gitry. Gidiso na ako siya og 90.
Next 90, di ba?
Mal na 120, 140 nga to.
140 sunod 200 ito.
Mumray nga na, Doc.
I-try do to mo.
Try ang
I-try do ang ano sa butong 200 to 190. Pag ini 1 week naman siya, di ba?
1 week na na.
Kaya lang din na kadako ang GB niya.
Oo, dili.
Ikaw to ko i-load na 2 ka 90. Tama gusto 1 week, no?
Ay, mao?
7 days. 7 days siya. Dili siya 5 days.
Mm,
Diba 90, 5 days, di ba?
7 days.
7 days.
Ah.
Tama din. Pero ang 7 days na itong duha.
Itong duha.
Ay, zero?
Naa.
Ila?
Dos. Gusto ni mo do katong lain na ano?
Makatawag mo ito, 190 ba ito? 200.
Shift na to. 140, 11 gigabytes siya. Plus 2 gigabytes nga go Wi-Fi valid for 7 days. Gihapon siya, Doc.
140 na available na siya.
Oh.
Kaya ka na, duduwagan na lang.
So mag-load kag another 140?
Ano ba sa ayaw, ako na suwaya sa 90. Sunod na lang dahil.
Ah,
Sorry.
nagdimog na.
Wala na ko na, huwag ko panood.
Thank you. Ma'am, kulang ni dos.
Ay, pinaday.
Sa is. Back to back ni siya, ma'am.
Ang kuan, butter.
Oo.
Ay, ang
Ni ID.
ang ID dahil. Ay, ma'am. Bago na din. Pero din, asan ang try na sa dito sa ang siyang po.
Nyara, oh. Thank you. The approach we had first taken with him was the outgrowth of years of conditioning and experience in the personality ethic. It was the result of a deeper paradigms we held about our own success as parents, as well as the measure of success of our children. And it was not until we changed those basic paradigms, until we saw things differently, that we were able to create quantum change in ourselves in the situation. In order to see our son differently, Sandra and I had to be differently. Our new paradigm was created as we invested in the growth and development of our own character. Paradigms are inseparable from character. Being is seeing in the human dimension.
Wallet na.
Thank you. Paradigms are inseparable from character. Being is seeing in the human dimension, and what we see is highly interrelated to what we are. We can't go very far to change our seeing without simultaneously changing our being, and vice versa. Even in my apparently instantaneous paradigm shifting experience that morning on the subway, my change of vision was a result of and limited by my basic character. I'm sure there are people who, even suddenly understanding the true situation, would have felt no more than a twinge of regret. Twinge. Would have felt no more than a twig of regret. Twig of regret. Twig of regret. Twig. Twinge. A sudden sharp localized pain. Mm. Or vague guilt as they continued to sit in embarrassed silence beside the grieving, confused man. On the other hand, I am equally certain there are people who would have been far more sensitive in the first place, who may have recognized that a deeper problem existed and reached out to understand and help before I did. Paradigms are powerful because they create the lens through which we see the world. The power of a paradigm shift is essential of power of quantum change, whether that shift is an instantaneously or a slow and deliberate process. The principle-centered paradigm. The character ethic is based on the fundamental idea that there are principles that govern human effectiveness, natural laws in the human dimension that are just as real, just as unchanging in
Eh,
arguably.
pila kayo mong 50 na load check?
53.
Te, pero mas akong text eh.
Ha?
Nabili nung muna ko pitatapin, wala akong kailangan i-chat ba?
Smart?
Oh, magbuha na ako bayaran te.
Smart? 09.
39
Oo.
72
Oo.
39
Oo.
707.
0930-972-39707.
Oh, ma'am.
50, no?
50 po. Thank you. Wala ka.
Oo.
Naman yun na tangpe.
Na Four Season. Sa?
Diyos na tang.
Na Four Season.
Alexa. Salam.
Twenty ni siya, ano, thank you. The character ethic is based on the fundamental idea that there are principles that govern human effectiveness, natural laws in the human dimension that are just as real, just as unchanging in arguably there as laws such as gravity are in the physical dimension. An idea of the reality in the impact of this principle can be captured in another paradigm shifting experience, as told by Franco and Proceeding, the magazine of the Naval Institute. Two battleships assigned to the training squadron had been at sea on maneuvers in heavy weather for several days. I was serving on the lead battleship and was on watch on the bridge as night fell. The visibility was poor with patchy fog, so the captain remained on the bridge keeping an eye on all activities. Shortly after dark, the lookout of the wing of the bridge reported light bearing on the starboard bow. Is it steady or moving astern? The captain called out. Lookout replied, steady, captain, which meant we were on a dangerous collision course with that ship. The captain then called the signalman. Signal that ship. We are on a collision course. Advise you change course 20 degrees. Back came a signal. Advisable for you to change course 20 degrees. The captain said, send, I'm a captain, change course 20 degrees. I'm a seaman second class, came the reply. You had better change course 20 degrees. By that time, the captain was furious. He spat out, send, I'm a battleship. Change course 20 degrees. Back came the flashing light. I'm a lighthouse. We changed course. The paradigm shift experienced by the captain and by us as we read this account puts the situation in a total different light. We can see a reality that is superseded by his limited perception, a reality that is as critical for us to understand in our daily lives as it was for the captain in the fact. Principles are like lighthouse. They are natural laws that cannot be broken. As Seville B. DeMille observed of the principles contained in his monumental movie, The Ten Commandments, it is impossible for us to break the law. We can only break ourselves against the law. While individuals may look at their own lives and interactions in terms of paradigms or maps merging out of their experience and conditioning, these maps are not the territory. They are a subjective reality, only an attempt to describe the territory. The objective reality or the territory itself is composed of lighthouse principles that govern human growth and happiness. The natural laws that are woven into the fabric of every civilized society throughout history and comprise the roots of every family and institution that has endured and prospered. The degree to which our mental maps accurately describe the territory does not alter its existence. Ikaw na. The reality of such principles or natural laws becomes obvious to anyone who thinks deeply and examines the cycle of social history. These principles surface time and time again, and the degree to which people in a society recognize and live in harmony with them moves them toward either survival and stability or disintegration and destruction. The principles I am referring to are not esoteric, mysterious, or religious ideas. There is not one principle thought in this book that is unique to any specific faith or religion, including my own. These principles are a part of most every major enduring religion, as well as enduring social philosophies and ethical system. They are self-evident and can easily be validated by any individual. It's almost as if these principles or natural laws are part of the human condition, part of the human consciousness, part of the human conscience. They seem to exist in all human beings, regardless of social conditioning and loyalty to them, even though they might be submerged or numbered numbed by such condition or disloyalty. I am referring, for example, to the principle of fairness, out of which our whole concept of equity in justice is developed. Little children seem to have an innate sense of the idea of fairness even apart from opposite conditioning experience. There are vast differences in how fairness is defined and achieved, but there is almost universal awareness of the idea. Other examples would include integrity and honesty. They create the foundation of trust, which is essential to cooperation and long term personal and interpersonal growth. Another principle is human dignity. The basic concept in the United States Declaration of Independence bespeak, bespeaks in this value or principle. We hold this truth to be self evident that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Another principle is service, or the idea of making a contribution. Another is quality or excellence. There is the principle of potential, the idea that we are embryonic and can grow and develop and release more and more potential, develop more and more talents. Highly related to potential is the principle of growth, the process of releasing potential and developing talents with the accompanying need for principle such as patience, nurturance, and encouragement. Principles are not practices. A practice is a specific activity or action. A practice that works in one circumstance will not necessarily work in another. As parents who have tried to raise a second child exactly like they did the first can readily attest. While practices are situationally specific, principles are deep, fundamental truths that have universal application. They apply to individuals, to marriages, to families, to private and public obligations of every kind. When these truths are internalized into habits, they empower people to create a wide variety of practices to deal with different situations. Principles are not values. A gang of thieves can share values, but they are in violations of the fundamental principles we're talking about. Principles are the territory, values are maps. When we value correct principles, we have truth and knowledge of things as they are. Principles are guidelines for human conduct that are proven to have enduring, permanent value. They're fundamental. They're essentially unarguable because they are self evident. One way to quickly grasp the self evident nature of principles is to simply consider the absurdity of attempting to live an effective life based on their opposites. I doubt that anyone would seriously consider unfairness, deceit, baseness, uselessness, mediocrity, or degeneration to be a solid foundation for lasting happiness and success. Although people may argue about how these principles are defined or manifested or achieved, there seems to be an innate consciousness and awareness that they exist. The more closely our maps or paradigms are aligned with these principles or natural laws, the more accurate and functional they will be. Correct maps will infinitely impact our personal and interpersonal effectiveness far more than any amount of effort expended on changing our attitudes and behavior. Principles of growth and change. The glitter of the personality ethic. The massive appeal is that there is some quick and easy way to achieve quality of life, personal effectiveness, and reach deep relationships with other people without going through the natural process of work and growth that makes it possible. It's symbol without substance. It's the get rich quick scheme promising wealth without work, and it might even appear to succeed, but the schemer remains. The personality ethic is illusory and deceptive in trying to get high quality results with its techniques and quick fix. Is this about as expected as trying to get to some place in Chicago using a map of Detroit? In the words of Erich Fromm, an astute observer of the roots and fruits of the personality ethic. Today, we come across an individual who behaves like automaton, 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 automation. Is there a word automaton? Automaton, automaton. Hmm? A moving mechanical device made an imitation of a human being. Ah, automaton. Hmm. Today, we come across an individual who behaves like an automaton, who does not know or understand himself, and the only person that he knows is the person that he is supposed to be, whose meaningless chatter has replaced communicative speech, whose synthetic smile has replaced genuine laughter, and whose sense of dull despair has taken the place of genuine pain. Two statements may be said concerning this individual. One is that he suffers from defects or spontaneity and individuality, which may seem to be incurable. At the same time, it may be said of him he does not differ essentially from the millions of the rest of us who walk upon this earth. In all of life, there are sequential stages of growth and development. A child learns to turn over, to sit up, to crawl, and then walk and run. Each step is important, and each one takes time. No step can be skipped. This is true in all phases of life, in all areas of development, whether it whether it be learning to play the piano or communicate effectively with a working associate. It is true with individuals, with marriages, with families, and with organizations. We know and accept this fact or principle or process in the area of physical things, but to understand it is emotional areas in human relations, and even in the area of personal character is less common and more difficult. And even if we understand it, to accept it and to live in harmony with it are even less common and more difficult. Consequently, we sometimes look for a shortcut, expecting to be able to skip some of these vital steps in order to save time and effort and still reap the desired result. But what happens when we attempt to shortcut a natural process in our growth and development? If you are only an average tennis player but decide to play at a higher level in order to make a better impression, what will result? Saman,
Hello.
saman,
Ano load eh?
sang load sa
10,
pila
this lang,
09
0926
mm,
847
mm.
5066.
0926 847 5066.
Oh, this lang.
Haraan. If you are only an average tennis player but decide to play at a higher level in order to make a better impression, what will result? Oo nga. Would positive thinking alone enable you to compete effectively against a professional? What if you were to lead your friends to believe you could play the piano at concert hall level while your actual present skill was that of a beginner? The answer are obvious. It is simply impossible to violate, ignore, or shortcut this development process. It is contrary to nature in attempting to seek such a shortcut only result in disappointment and frustration. On a 10-point scale, if I am at level 2 in any field and desired to move to level 5, I must first take the step toward level 3. A 1,000-mile journey begins with the first step. A 1,000 mile. A 1,000 mile begins with the first step. And can be and can only be taken one step one step at a time. 1,000 mile mali. 1,000 mile journey. 1,000 1,000 mile journey. Journey begins with the first step. And can only be taken one step at a time. A thousand journey. A 1,000 mile journey begins with the first step and can only be taken one step at a time. If you don't let a teacher know at what level you are by asking a question or revealing your ignorance, you will not learn or grow. You cannot pretend for long, for you will eventually be found out. Admission of ignorance is often the first step in our education. Thoreau thought. How can we remember our ignorance, which our growth requires, when we are using our knowledge all the time? I recall one occasion when two young women, daughters of a friend of mine, came to me tearfully, complaining about their father's harshness and lack of understanding. They were afraid to open up with their parents for fear of the consequences, and yet they desperately needed their parents' love, understanding, and guidance. I talked with the father and found that he was intellectually aware of what was happening. But while he admitted he had a temper problem, he refused to take responsibility for it and to honestly accept the fact that his emotional development level was low. It was more than his pride could swallow to take the first step toward change. To relate to relate effectively with a wife, a husband, children, friends, or working associates, we must learn to listen, and this requires emotional strength. Listening involves patience, openness, in the desire to understand, and in the desire to understand highly developed qualities of character. It's so much easier to operate from a low emotional level and to give high level advice. Our level of development is fairly obvious with tennis or piano playing, where it is important to pretend, where it is impossible to pretend. But it is not so obvious in the areas of character and emotional development. We can pose and put on for a stranger or an associate. We can pretend, and for a while we can get by with it, at least in public. We might even deceive ourselves. Yet I believe that most of us know the truth of what we really are inside. And I think many of those we live with and work with do as well. I have seen the consequences of attempting to shortcut this natural process of growth open in the business world, where executives attempt to buy a new culture, improve productivity, quality, morale, and customer service with strong speeches, smile training, and external intervention, or through mergers, acquisitions, and friendly or unfriendly takeovers. But they ignore the low trust climate produced by such manipulation. When these methods don't work, they look for other personality ethic techniques that will, all the time ignoring and violating the natural principles and processes on which a high trust culture is based. I remember violating this principle myself as a father many years ago. One day, I returned home to my little girl's third year birthday party to find her in the corner of the front room defiantly clutching all of her presents, unwilling to let the other children play with them. The first thing I noticed was several parents in the room witnessing this selfish display. I was embarrassed, and doubly so because of the time I was teaching university classes in human relations. And I knew, or at least felt, the expectation of these parents. The atmosphere in the room was really changed. The children were crowding around my little daughter with their hands out, asking to play with the presents they had just given, and my daughter was adamantly refusing. I said to myself, certainly I shall teach my daughter to share. The value of sharing is one of the most basic things we believe in. So I first tried a simple request. Honey, would you please share with your friends the toys they've given you? No, she replied flatly. My second method was to use a little reasoning. Honey, if you learn to share your toys with them when they are at home, then when you go to their homes, they will share their toys with you. Again, the immediate reply was no. I was becoming a little more embarrassed, for it was evident I was having no influence. The third method was bravery. 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 Mhm. The giving or offering of a bribe. Very softly I said, honey, if you share, I've got a special surprise for you. I'll give you a piece of gum. I don't want gum, she exploded. Now I was becoming exasperated. For my fourth attempt, I resorted to fear and threat. Unless you're sure you will be in a real trouble. I don't care, she cried. These are my things. I don't have to share. Finally, I resorted to force. I merely took some of the toys and gave them to the other kids. Here, kids, play with this. Perhaps my daughter needed the experience of possessing the things before she could give them. In fact, unless I possess something, can I ever really give it? She needed me as her father to have a higher level of emotional maturity to give her that experience. But at that moment, I valued the opinion those parents had of me more than the growth and development of my child and our relationship together. I simply made an initial judgment that I was right. She should share, and she was wrong in doing so. Perhaps I superimposed a higher level expectation on her simply because Perhaps I superimposed a higher level expectation on her simply because on my own scale I was at a lower level. I was unable or unwilling to give patience or understanding, so I expected her to give things. In an attempt to compensate for my deficiency, I borrowed strength from my position and authority and forced her to do what I wanted her to do. But borrowing strength builds weakness. It builds weakness in borrower because it reinforces dependence on external factors to get things done. It builds weakness in the person forced to acquiesce, stunting the development of independent reasoning growth and internal discipline. And finally, it builds weakness in the relationship. Fear replaces cooperation, and both people involved become more arbitrary and defensive. And what happens when the source of borrowed strength, be in superior size or physical strength, position, authority, credentials, status symbols, appearance, or past achievements, changes or is no longer there? Had I been more matured, I could have relied on my own intrinsic strength. my understanding of sharing, and of growth in my capacity to love and nurture, and allowed my daughter to make a free choice as to whether she wanted to share or not to share. Perhaps after attempting to reason with her, I could have turned the attention of the children to an interesting game, taking all that emotional pressure off my child. I've learned that once children gain a sense of real possession, they share very naturally, freely, and spontaneously. My experience has been that there are times to teach and times not to teach. When relationships are strained in the air charged with emotion, an attempt to teach is often perceived as a form of judgment and rejection. But to take the child alone, quietly when the relationship is good and to discuss the teaching or the value seems to have much greater impact. It may have been that the emotional maturity to do that was beyond my level of patience and eternal control of the time. Perhaps a sense of possessing needs to come before a sense of genuinely sharing. Many people who give mechanically or refuse to give, ensure in their marriages and families, may never have experienced what it means to possess themselves, their own sense of identity and self worth. Really, helping our children grow may involve being patient enough to allow them the sense of possession, as well as being wise enough to teach them the value of giving and providing the example ourselves. Tama. So, tomorrow, we will, I'll try to read page 41. Page 40, we will end page 40. So, it will be the next thing. The way we see the problem is the problem. Tomorrow, that will be discussed. Or I will be reading this one. The way we see the problem is the problem. So, sa perception, so kailangan talaga laliman, hindi maging judgmental. Parang titingnan mo yung ibang level, ibang sa ibang anggulo. Nakakatuwa nga. Alam mo, nakakatuwa yung ano, sa mga nakikinig dito. Nakakatuwa yung titingnan mo din yung different views ng isang tao. Kasi dun mo makikita kung ano yung tingin niya, ano yung pananaw niya sa buhay. Yung sa mga pagtingin niya sa bagay-bagay. Meron akong kakilala nga ganyan. Parang ano kami, parang iba talaga yung tingin namin sa mga bagay-bagay. Which is, yun din yung nagustuhan ko. Kasi, the more na nagiging open ako sa point ko at ino-open din niya yung point niya, mas lalo kaming nagkakaintindihan sa mga bagay na sa tingin namin is ako ang tama tapos siya ay mali, or tingin niya ako ang mali tapos siya ang tama. So, enough na siguro yung pagbabasa ko ngayon. Then, next time ulit, sana subaybayan nyo yung pagbabasa ko para kayo din, yung mga learnings na tinuturo dito ni Sir Stephen Covey is yung matutunan nyo din, kagaya ko, matuto din dito sa mga example niya. Yun yung nakaka-ano dito sa ano na libro na to. Marami siyang sample ng mga illustrations ng mga mga senaryo na kung ano ba. So, happy ako kasi 20 plus another 20 is 40 pages na yung nabasa ko. So, ito is ilang pages ba to? Abot tayo ng yung librong to is aabot ng 340 pages. So, matagal-tagal, pero let's see yung improvement sa ano natin. Yung sa vocabulary natin, tayong mga natutunan ng mga words, and then learning. Para kasi ang nakakaganda kasi sa libro is para kang nakikipag-usap ng napakatalinong tao. Yung parang nakikipag-usap ka sa kanya o yung parang nakukuha mo yung mga idea niya dahil sa librong sinulat niya. Yung nasa utak niya parang na dahil binabasa mo yung libro niya, na-adapt mo yung the way of thinking niya. So, yun. So, ngayon, walang nag-visit sa channel ko. But hopefully, yung makakapanood nito, pag babalikan nila or kaya mapanood nila yung channel na to is marami silang matutunan sa binasa kong libro. Thank you again for the opportunity sa channel niya ni YouTube. Kasi nakakatulong talaga siya. Makakapag-share sa mga ibang tao na gusto din matuto. Kagaya ko. Nawa yung matutunan ko dito is talagang ma-apply ko para maging effective na individual ako. And that's all for this afternoon. God bless everyone. And dun sa hindi pa nakapag-subscribe sa akin, please do subscribe. Thank you.
Ching,
Tay?
painit.